teachers of Reddit, what's the cringiest thing you've seen students do? I teach primary elementary grades in a tough urban area. Something cringeworthy happens almost every day, but this one stands out the most. Several years ago, during an art lesson, I had students spread out around the room, so they had space to paint. One of my smartest, best behaved boys chose to sit in at a big table in a corner by himself. As I'm teaching, I see my aide give me the look in his direction. I walk over, and my first thought was, is that his thumb? My second thought was, why is it purple? Then I looked at his actual thumbs that were attached to his hands, one of which was covered in purple paint, vigorously massaging his third thumb that he had carefully removed from a hole he had cut in his trousers. He saw me looking at his third thumb and pulled it back into his pants. I'm a mandated reporter, so I called. The local PD interviewed me, and I told them exactly what I just wrote. I still have smudges of purple paint underneath my group table in the back of my room. This boy went on to be valedictorian of his class. I bet he'll never forget the day his teacher caught him masturbating with purple tempera paint in the back of the class. He got caught purple-handed. One student kept calling one of the TARs daddy. This was in a sophomore college class. In school we had a kid known simply as the Simpson kid. He'd be decked out in full-on Simpson merch, uniform permitting, and would get violently cross if you said the Simpsons sucks. He did many weird things, but the thing that sticks out in my memory is when he caught watching Simpson pronoun in the school library. I taught high school seniors for several years. One year I had a girl with special needs / other health impairment, which basically means she can mentally function with her peers, but has a disability. While she was as mentally capable as her peers, her family severely sheltered and coddled her in such a way that she was really naive about people and the world around her. Her face was also a little deformed, which made her very shy. One day, I heard her talking about her online boyfriend and thought, oh, good for her. Later that week, the teacher across the hall from me came by to apprise me of a situation that had happened with the girl and her online BF. Apparently, the girl was talking about the guy more in detail in this teacher's class, and the teacher overheard the girl say, my boyfriend is in a band, his name's Zane. My teacher friend said, oh haha, like One Direction? And she seriously replied, yes, he is Zayn Malik from One Direction. This teacher went back and forth with her about how unlikely it was that she was chatting with Zayn Malik, and she tried to refute it by comparing concert times / dates with their chat records. It turned out she'd shared a lot of personal information with this guy, and my teacher friend was genuinely concerned for the girl. As a mandated reporter, the teacher called our principal, social worker, and her parents into a meeting, which resulted in the poor kid weeping and realizing she'd been had. I felt so awful for her, as it was clear she just wanted to feel romantic love for the first time in her life. I don't think the Zane catfisher was ever caught. Even after working with children as an adult, I don't think anyone I teach will top this. I was in 8th grade in math class. This girl used to constantly try to discreetly masturbate in class. She had her hoodie over her lap covering her hand that was digging around in her pants. After a few minutes I saw her pull her hand out, completely covered in blood. She looked at it for a moment, shrugged her shoulders, and wiped her bloody hand on her desk. 2 kids spat on each other in app world history because one kid got a question wrong in Jeopardy teams and another kid was making fun of him for it, and he spat on him, so he spat back. The news spread faster than warm butter. I have a student right now who is obsessed with Animal House. You know, the 80s movie. He's utterly convinced that his college experience will be exactly like the movie, and has wasted a great deal of time during practice telling anyone who will listen about it. The other night I caught him boring one of my girls to death with an in-depth analysis of the film, complete with a 10-minute explanation of the plot. Also, he could provide context for his senior quote, which is of course from the movie. The look in her eyes said, either help me escape or kill me now. I don't have the heart to tell him that the college is going to actually ban fraternities. A bunch of kindergarten kids running around screaming, do you know Dawi? From a student's perspective, when I was a junior in high school I told my teacher that my type was 30-year-old recently divorced women because I thought it'd be funny. I have an obnoxious sense of humor. It totally went over my head as I said it, that she completely fit that description, and she just nervously laughed and said that's kind of weird, but I can't blame you for it. I was in a regional high school in a Philly suburb for a while. There was a really nice kid who was pretty high functioning, but definitely had some developmental issues. He was really happy to be a part of the football team. He didn't play, but they gave him a jersey and let him practice. You could see how much confidence he had with the jersey on. He finally got up the nerve to talk to a girl he liked, but made the mistake of approaching her while she was with a group of friends. He'll never forget the dialogue. Hey Dominique, any plans for the weekend? Ain't nobody trying to holler at you. Radio, hard to watch. But he later became a football coach for developmentally disabled kids in Nebraska from what I could tell on his Facebook. Good for him. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school, I broke my thumb. They gave me a flesh-colored plastic cast that basically fit over my thumb to immobilize it. It looked like a deck. While at lunch, a kid asked to see it, and then unzipped and shoved it through the front of his pants, and showed a lunch lady. She screamed and then ran off, and within 30 seconds 10 male teachers grabbed him, and pretty violently dragged him off to the dean's office. I got called in a couple of minutes later to show them the cast and prove that it wasn't this kid's actual deck. I was going to get detention too until I was like, in a million years did I think he was going to pretend it was a dildo and flash a lunch lady? No. Edit, a letter. Not a teacher, but this story is directly from my mom, who is a high school teacher. About 6 or 7 years ago, during homecoming, there was a student that was desperate to get a date. He was a nice kid, but socially awkward, and didn't understand why girls would get freaked out when he would run up to them in the hallways with a bouquet of flowers, and usually some other gift, and ask them to the dance. This was before the huge popularity of promposals. This would have been usual high school awkward, except for the fact that it became known amongst his class that he had a list of girls to ask to the dance. This list started at his most intense crush, and even included his ex from sophomore year. Once one girl said no, he'd move on to the next. This happened for about a week, and finally someone said yes. She was this quiet sweetheart of a girl who didn't want to see him keep getting hurt. While it ended alright, the whole process was one cringe-worthy moment after another. One of them wore a furry tail to a school event. Thankfully I seem to be the only one who frequents the internet enough to find it cringy. But man, it was so cringy. I'm so glad I get to share this. Prepare yourself. You know how kids will clean anything off their hands with their mouth. Just lick or shove the whole fist in there. Well, this little girl, she's 3, was in the bathroom and was wiping herself after pooping. She pulls her hand out from wiping and checks to see if she's clean. She sees some poop smeared on her finger and takes a dainty little lick. I'm positive the dirty paper also touched her face, which is another level of nasty. I've never felt such instant nausea in my life. My rookie year teaching, I had finished grad school and was 26. We were doing some independent work in my class and 3 kids were doing nothing and standing together suspicious. So I walk over to see what they're doing, because it's clearly not their world history assignment. I ask, hey guys, what are you doing? Kid 1, watching pronoun. This was 2007 to 2008 and the kid has a break the floor Nokia with a 1-inch screen. I smirk thinking he's trying to make a joke of it. Then he turns the phone in my direction. Nope, it's pronoun. I ask him for the phone. To my surprise he hands it over without question. I write his name on a post-it note, rubber band it to the phone, and call my assistant principal to come collect the kid's phone. It's been a while, so I don't remember what consequences the kid got. I think my app handled it, because I'm pretty sure I'd remember writing that referral. Last year I watched a group of kids dab on him while roasting another. Like every joke, the entire group of like 6 kids dabbed and yelled. It was painful and made me very happy. I'm now in a K4 school. Not a very detailed one, but here goes. Was halfway through giving a social studies lesson when, completely out of the blue, a kid in the back row of the class shot out of his chair, screamed for Tuxini Alfredo at a volume reserved only for movie theaters, looked around, realized his mistake, and walked straight into a bookshelf. I heard my students talking about a new game where they yell suicide and jump in front of cars. Send help. Edit. Hey, just a friendly reminder to those of you who are talking about natural selection. Kids can grow out of being stupid if they live to do so. Heck, helping them grow out of their terminal stupidity is our job as the teachers and or adults in their life. As fun as it is to joke about natural selection from a distance, it's unspeakably awful when they actually get hurt or die. I teach a class of middle schoolers and had to reprimand a kid for using his research time to exclusively search for the phrase dank memes on Pinterest. Had a 14-year-old dude just decide to whip out his deck in class. I asked him what he was thinking later, and he just looked sheepish and said, "I really don't know." Was a good kid that didn't cause much trouble, just decided to take the dog out for a walk, I guess. Also had a severely mentally disabled girl unconsciously start fondling herself, which escalated into a very loud, gross, chill session. I finally had to stop teaching and quietly go over to her and say, "Please don't do that," and she kind of jerked back to reality and took her hand out of her pants. Awkwardness ensued for everyone around her. Girls were talking about how to get drunk really fast. Alcohol-soaked tampons. Can you imagine what that does to your pH levels? I teach college-level adults in ESL. I once had a Korean man who was in his late 20s or early 30s grill a Q80 student on whether or not it was true that the guy really only used his left hand for wiping his butt. A bit late to the party, but I had one student who was in her early teens. Her name was Angel. For a while her favorite thing to say was, "I may not be an angel, but my name is." Then when no one responded she would repeat it. I will never forget the discomfort. Not at a school, but at a kids camp. I'm on wake up duty and go around turning lights on in the rooms. Then I make the rounds to make sure all the kids are getting ready for the day. I check a room and there are two boys inside. One is holding a Snickers down where his bleep would be. The other is right in front of him with his mouth closed to it. And the kid keeps saying, "You want my candy bar? You want my candy bar?" They saw me and froze. I just noped out and pretended I never saw anything. Valentine's Day, 2014. Boy acquired a heart-shaped cookie. At lunch, he stands on a table and proclaims his love for his girl. Asks her to take the cookie, which represents his heart, and hands it to her to take care of. Girl is so embarrassed she flat out refused. He takes the cookie and crumbles it, saying this is what she did to his heart, and tosses it at her. Kid sat next to her in all of his core classes. My class was after lunch, as I had just witnessed him doing this. We were working on poetry at the time, and found out he took my advice that we write poetry. To woo one was even more awkward that he shared his poem afterward. Voluntarily. In hopes of trying to win her heart. I mean, this would have been pretty adorable if he didn't throw the cookie at her or continued to state his unrequited love in every class. Girl was obviously a little freaked out. Obligatory, not a teacher, but there's a clip of some college kid standing up in a lecture and giving an impassioned speech. I think from LOTR, but it's not coming up in my search, so perhaps something else. Anyway, he gets crickets. Why God? Once a teacher pulled up an absent student's prank channel and the whole class just started roasting him. I watched one pathetic frikapua fail his way through every single girl in a lecture, then drop the course. On the plus side, we had a nice little internal meme for the rest of term. I posted earlier about a 17-year-old who likes to eat his boogies, but even worse was the kid a few years ago who would put his hands down his pants and then sniff his fingers. Like the girl from SNL but balls. I've also had more than one kid who picked zits all class period and left a ring of DNA around him every day. I asked each boy's guidance counselor to speak to him about it, of course. My middle school classroom is set up in a U-shape. One student in the very middle of the U, so directly in my field of vision, started masturbating in the middle of a lesson. Like she wasn't even trying to be subtle. We made eye contact and she didn't stop. My wife is a teacher for K5. She was telling me this week about her kids at work. Right now the school is taking up money for a charity for children with leukemia. So one of her classes decided it was funny to go around saying, "If you do you'll get leukemia," and then giggling about it. For example, "If you drink from that water fountain / touch that person / etc you'll get leukemia." She ends up settling them all down and explaining to them that it's not funny that kids their age are dying every day from cancer and that it could happen to any of them at any time during their lives. So she's been dealing with the aftermath of parents mad because their children now think they are going to drop dead any second. Not a teacher, but in my last year of middle school some 6th graders replaced the Shrek in Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life with the name of one of our older male teachers. It was extremely uncomfortable to hear, and they thought it was the funniest thing, which made it that much worse. My friend was a teacher, and he told us friends while drinking that he caught a kid drinking roof water that was pouring off the roof from last night's rain. The kid was 12 and my friend was really grossed out as we all were. I overheard a conversation between 2 of my grade 8 students at an alternative school. "He took my virginity last week." "You mean, like, forever?" Oy vey. I'm a school cook and I always try to thank the kids by name after hiring them into the register. I said to a 5th grader, "Thanks, Sophie," but her real name, and said, "I love you too, Mom." I found it amusing, but she was quite embarrassed. I teach kindergarten. Last week during playtime, I saw one kid nonchalantly sniff another kid's butt. She didn't notice and he just continued on like it was no big deal. I've worked security at schools and have taught every grade from pre-kindergarten to senior in high school, as well as coached middle and high school sports, so I've seen a lot. Kids picking their nose and eating it, hands in pants both front and back. Kids leaving the bathroom door wide open to the playground while they do their business, sloppy makeouts when they thought they had a good hiding place. Overheard discussions about many topics I wish I hadn't. The list goes on and on. The worst is probably the things they say to me. I've been proposed to, informed of parents' drinking habits, received the gossip about who's dating who as well as who they are cheating on them with, where the parties are no, never even though of attending. They just like to tell me stuff. Who's drunk at prom, who wants to fight who, and why. But the worst probably has to be the girls who want me to be informed of their cycles. I'm a male pet teacher and they think they can make me uncomfortable or grossed out if they go into detail, and I'll let them sit out of class. It never works. Not a teacher, but back when I was in high school there was a kid who couldn't control his sphincter and would shoot himself randomly in class. We would all just be sitting in class and all of a sudden the classroom would just smell like the worst shoot ever and he would run out. I always felt so bad for that kid. This isn't cringy, but just a horrible story. Back in 09 I think. There was a story from a middle school near us in Florida that 4 kids ganged up on this one kid in the locker-rooms. They shoved a hockey stick and a broomstick up his ass brutally and all 4 of them got arrested. It was widely talked about at the time and well known throughout the area. I'm not a teacher, but my mommy's. One year in her 1st grade class, she watched as a student coughed up a bunch of phlegm into her hand and then slurped it back into her mouth to swallow it. I'm a student, but I've seen my fair share of cringy stuff. A really skinny kid decided to punch a very athletic kid because he stole his hat just to wear it for a second. Yeah, didn't end up too well for the skinny kid. A kid once came back from a cruise in the US and told everyone that he met some girl and got a blowjob off of her. Thing is, he told everyone different versions of the story and people put together that it was entirely bullshit. He still gets sued for it to this day. 3 There's this year 12 that is dating a year 9. They had a date at Play Planet last week. It was on both their stories. 4 This one's kind of funny but oh well. Our head of 6th form told us in an assembly that if we ever got grief from the lower years we were to go to him and not do anything about it directly ourselves. We were the image of the 6th form so had to look good, and at one point a 6th former was getting a lot of shoot from a year 7, and so he went to our head of 6th and told him about the year 7 that was giving him a lot of shoot. And our head of 6th waited in the canteen at lunch times until he witnessed it occurring. At that point he then starting full on screaming at the year 7 in front of everyone that was in the canteen and made him stand there for the entirety of lunch. These are only a few I can think of. ATM. I'm about to go to sleep, but if you guys want more I can ask a few of my friends if they remember some cringy stories. I'm not a teacher, but I was at Target and I saw some kids from school. One of them said, "When we get to the parking lot, let's yell 'let's get it.'" Sure enough, they were all yelling it in the parking lot when I came out. I'm not the teacher, but a student in high school. In my 7th grade year a student was caught wanking off in class to the teacher. Not a teacher, but was taking a psychology class for college cred. I've basically taken all of the courses at my college because I love it, but I wasn't going to continue it for a higher degree. One of the last classes I took, my professor lets us get into groups for a survival activity. Me with 2 undergrad girls, one shorter than me, white, brunette, and one who looks fresh out of high school, also white with blonde hair and a habit of drawing anime in her sketchbook during lecture. You can see where this is going. He hands out a list and tells us to pick 10 out of 20 to have and then label them 1 to 10 of most to least important. If you were stranded on a desert island, I'm always thinking of a backup plan. I go through the things we can skip if another tool is able to do it just as well. There was a machete with a blade that also had a serrated feature, so I opted to skip the axe and the saw. So we're going over what groups chose, and we come onto the subject of knives, and where they fall into our hierarchy of needs when suddenly blonde girl goes, "Yeah, like this," and pulls a freaking blade just a few inches shorter from "That's not a knife" out of her tote bag. Everyone froze. I looked at the professor in abject horror. He glanced at me, an African American professor, right in the wake of a racially charged police shooting. And at that moment we realized, had the situation been reversed then the classroom would have been swarmed with campus police. He took a breath, let it go, and moved on with a quiet, "Alright." On to the next point. No one said anything about it, ever. If I still didn't have a corroborating witness, my other group member, I'd think I imaged that whole goddamn thing.